Hi, I'm Jack Ginn, uh, and I'm happy to be presenting today. Tell you a little bit about myself. I'm 55 years old. I've been coaching college football for over 30 years, and I've just taken a position at our high school here in Allendale, Michigan. And so I'm going to give high school coaching a run for the first time in my career. And so I'm just going to share some things that I've learned in over 3 decades in coaching. Tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from Virginia. I played at Richlands High School in Virginia, and I was an average high school player. I went to a Division III school in Virginia, Emory Henry College. I was actually a place kicker in college, and then got into coaching. I went to school with a lot of coaches. We had great coaches there, and they produced a lot of coaches out of that athletic department, and I was blessed to be a part of that. So my coaching experience, I was a GA at the University of Illinois. I went back to my alma mater and coached defensive backs there for 6 years. Went to another D3 school in Iowa, Wartburg College, very successful program there. I was offensive coordinator and coached quarterbacks and receivers. Went on to a Division II school in West Virginia, Shepherd College, where I was the quarterback and receiver coach. And then I took over as the head coach at North Carolina Wesleyan College in North Carolina, and started a Division III football program from scratch, which was the best experience of my career, and really shaped a lot of, you want to find out what you know, you go start a program from scratch, you'll figure it out quick. So that was a great experience there, and we were very successful, and had a great run there. And then I came to Grand Valley State and coached at Grand Valley State as the some combination of associate head coach, receiver coach, and offensive coordinator my last 2 years. But I was at Grand Valley for 12 years, and came here with Chuck Martin, and coached under Matt Mitchell for a long, the entire up till next season, his entire head coaching career at Grand Valley. And so obviously a great program there that I was, honored to be a part of. And we really liked this community here. And my time at Grand Valley ended, and wanted to stay in the area. And Ben Burke has offered me the opportunity to join his staff at Allendale High School. And so I'm going to be doing that in the fall, and very appreciative of that opportunity. The other experience I have is as a father. I have 2 sons, both of which have completed their high school. I have a son that graduated 2 years ago and a son that graduates this year. And both of them played, not paid, sorry, typo there, but played 4 years of high school football, wrestling, and track. And you would think with almost 30 years or just over 30 years of college coaching experience that, I have a kind of a handle on, well, this is how, it goes from the other end. But that was a great learning experience for me, being a parent, being on the other side of it, being in the stands for games. And I'll tell you, it changed some viewpoints that I have. I know from being around high school coaches for a long time in a lot of different places that a lot of times there's a divide between coaches and parents, and there seems to be a natural natural tension between those two groups. And I would share with coaches that the first thing to understand about parents is that they're not on your team. You want your players to put the team first, but don't confuse that with parents, because parents are not going to put the team first. The first priority for any parent is their child. And so I know that from being a coach, I understand that coaches, I think, have to put the team first. And but don't expect your parents to do that, and go into every conversation or contact with a parent understanding that their first um, their first concern is their child and not the team. And I think that can um, I think that can make some things easier on both ends. And I think explaining to parents that your first, as a coach, your first priority is the team, and why that is the case. And I want to talk a little bit more about those type dynamics here in a little bit, but I think just having those communication lines open and acknowledging that yes, we're all a part of this, but we may look at it through different lenses. I think acknowledging that with your parents can be a powerful thing. And I know some coaches are very, they invite people into their programs, and other ones are kind of standoffish and really don't want other people from the outside involved. I've just seen more guys have success getting people involved in their program. And I can tell you that, I always wanted to be a dad to my sons and not a coach. I would coach them if they wanted me to, if they wanted me to watch film with them, if they wanted me to, go out in the backyard and show them something or whatever, I would do it. But I never wanted to force that upon them. I wanted them to have a father, and that the but I was openly welcomed into the environments of every high school team that they took part in, and which really says a lot about the people that coached them, and that was something that I think was helpful for me as a parent, that I had full access, um, and will probably continue to show up at wrestling practice and track practice at Allendale High School for absolutely no reason, because I enjoy being around that. And I think a lot of the people that run those programs, obviously, I'll already be at football, but it's I think that sometimes coaches get a little too hung up on trying to keep people away. And if you can invite people in, if you're confident in what you're doing, if you can invite people in, I think you can make life easier for everybody a little bit that way. So, of course, I haven't coached a day of high school football, so but that's my take on it anyhow. I've recruited all over, everywhere I've been. So, I've been in one of the advantages I have going into high school football, I think, is I've been in a lot of high schools in a lot of different areas, and I've seen good programs and I've seen not good programs. And I can tell you that as a college recruiter, when you walk in a school, you can quickly, after you've done it a while, you can quickly put the ones and twos and threes together and figure out, okay, do these guys know what they're doing or do they not? And they're, schools that are doing it well, it becomes apparent pretty quickly. And so I've been to a lot of different places over a long period of time. So the first thing I'll talk about then is recruiting, because here's the thing about recruiting. It's going to happen. Not everybody likes recruiting. Okay, that's fine. You may not like paying your taxes either, but it's going to happen. So you might as well, do it as best you can. And I was the NFL liaison at Grand Valley, and which is the exact same role as a high school coach in recruiting. You know, I was the guy that talked to all the scouts and represented our players to the first line of, you know, people at another level looking at them. And really, the only thing that recruiters are looking for, guys that, you know, in a high school coach, is just be prepared and organized and consistent and honest. You don't have to have all the answers. No college recruiter is looking for you to make their evaluation. But they're looking for any information that can help them in their evaluation. And so you should feel, as a high school coach, you should feel open to share whatever your opinions are. And I can tell you from a guy that's recruited, you know, I recruited parts of Michigan and Indiana for 10, 12 years, same schools. And I developed a feel for each coach. And as long as that coach would be honest and consistent, then I could take that information and use it. You know, just because your opinion may not match the opinion of a guy down the road somewhere, it doesn't matter. As long as you can be honest and consistent, and obviously, you know, honesty and being upfront are not things that are, I think, very prevalent in recruiting. It's how I tried to handle my business. I kind of felt like the dinosaur out there, and but the more you can be that way, I think that you're going to make things, the whole process, run more smoothly for your players. And I understand that a high school coach's first priority is not as a recruiter, the high school coach's top priority is not my football program at a college. It's their high school players. And if you want that process, if you want to contribute to the recruiting process being as pleasant as possible for your players, I think just being organized and consistent and honest will do that. And find a way to enjoy the process. Like, I know some, you know, you get coaches coming in and out, your day gets interrupted and so forth. And, you know, things, you know, maybe you're working with a player and he's finding out some tough news or whatever. And it's not always, you know, fun. But if you can find a way to enjoy the process of it and enjoy meeting people and finding out things that you want to find out from them, I think that goes a long way. And then there's a book out there called 100%, 0%, which is not a bad way to live, really, of giving yourself 100% and expecting 0% in return. And I think that's, in the recruiting process, that's got to be the rule for high school coaches. Like, it's about the kid. It's not about you. It's not about your program. And just give everything you can to the process for each kid, and you don't expect anything back from it. And if you go at it with that mindset, then I think it will be more enjoyable, and I think you'll do a better job for your players, which is really what you should be focused on. So those are my thoughts on recruiting. And, you know, like I said, I'm an old guy on the road recruiting now. I don't really like everything about recruiting the way it runs now, but it is what it is. And my job is to find a way to enjoy it and do it as effectively as possible as a recruiter. So I think those are things that could help a high school coach that maybe doesn't enjoy the process or wonders what the best way for them to do things are. So I'm going to talk about coaching now, and you know, there are two parts to coaching, basically. There's coaching the sport, and there's coaching people. You know, strategy and schemes are important. Football strategy and schemes can give your players and your program an edge. But a less than average player in a great strategy or scheme versus a really good player in a lesser scheme, we all know how that's going to come out. The really good players still probably going to find a way to win that battle. And football coaches, if you're coaching football, you probably love the strategy and schemes of football. And that's a good thing. And I think studying those things is good. But that's not the answer. You're not going to strategize and scheme your way to the success that you want to have for your players and your program. And as football coaches, we love it more than anyone. And I think sometimes we get bogged down in, why doesn't everyone else love the strategy and the schemes of football the way we do? Well, hey, man, that's why we chose this as a profession. Say what you want. We all say it's about, kids and stuff, and that's true, but there's something in us that we love that. And a lot of times I think that, football coaches like doing football schemes. So that's what we do. When we have clinics, my college coach who I worked for at my alma mater, he coached Division III football for 40 years. And more impressive than that, he worked at 2 schools and was at each of them for 20 years or more. And he used to talk about clinics back in the day, back in his day. And, he said, we go to a coaching clinic, and it wasn't about X's and O's. It was about, how do you teach a 5 technique to play a reach block? Or how do you teach a guard to trap? Or, those types of techniques and fundamentals, and not about, okay, here's a new play, here's something you haven't done, blah, 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 all X's and O's. So X's and O's are great, but they're not the answer. And coaching people is more important than coaching football. Getting your players to do what you want them to do and doing it in a way that they enjoy. If you get that right, you can be in a lot of X's and O's and you're fine. I mean, we've all, I've always said, hey, I can draw you 100 plays, and they're sound. I can draw you a wishbone play, a wing T play, an air raid play, an empty play. Now, they're all sound plays. And there's a lot of ways to skin a cat that way, but getting players to do what you need them to do and doing it in a way that they enjoy it, that's coaching. And it has nothing to do with football. So we're going to spend more time, obviously, on these 2 subjects, but the strategy and scheme part, I'm not going to talk about any X's and O's, but I do think there are some things I've learned over the years that are important. You have to be flexible to best serve your players. So, what offense, do you run? You interview for a job, you get asked these things. You interview for a head coaching job. Well, coach, what's your offense going to look like? Well, how in the heck can someone, in my opinion, how in the heck can I tell you that if I don't know who my players are? Like, my offense better fit my players. And as a high school coach, that's, you're not recruiting to your team. In college and in professional football, you're obviously controlling your roster, and you can fit your roster to your scheme somewhat. But in high school football, you're not doing that. And you've got to do what your players do best. And the best coaches that I've ever known are the ones that have the vastness of knowledge to do that. Now, does that mean you've got to go out and learn everything? No, but it means that you've got to be smart enough to know what you need to go learn. And if that means you need to, change schemes or whatever, then you can do that. But there's a guy named Larry Karras who's won a ton of games at Mount Union College. And this next line is from him: people, formations, and plays. Like, that's how you formulate your offense. Who are your people? What formations do those people give you? And then what plays do you want to run out of those formations that those players are good at? We used to do this every year. The majority of my career when I've been on offense, it was about take all your skill players, because your 5-0 linemen are your 5-0 linemen. Okay. So you got, probably got a quarterback, although you could argue that you could put the quarterback in with the rest of the skill players. But in most of the offenses I was involved in, your quarterback's your quarterback. And then who are the other 5 guys you want on the field? Just take all your skill guys and throw them in one big pile. And all right, who do you want on the field? Who do you want touching the ball? Who are the top 5? And then who are the next 3 or 4? And that will tell you what personnel groups you need to be in, which is going to help dictate what formations you're going to be in. And then what do those players do well? And that's how I think you go about formulating an offense. And I think that formulating a defense is pretty similar. Of who are your best 11 players on defense, and what structure allows those people to get on the field, and what are those players good at? I'm going to use my time a little bit to describe these thoughts, talking about my team at North Carolina Wesleyan. So North Carolina Wesleyan is in Eastern North Carolina, Division III school. We had a ton of kids from small rural towns that were between Raleigh and the coast, that no one stops in. That's where we got a lot of our players. And we figured out pretty quickly, okay, there's a lot of really good athletes in that area. I wouldn't call them great football players. I don't know that we were the best football team, but we were really athletic. And, we used to say all the time, we might be going up to play a really good football team. Well, we don't want this to be a game about football. We want it to be a game about athleticism. And, or as I used to put it, hey, we want to turn this thing into a circus, not a football game in a phone booth. And what we did offensively and what we did defensively were very much that way. Our defense, just back in the early 2000s, but we lined up in a 3-4 defense, and we zone pressured 98% of the time. And we could chase you down. We had some pretty athletic people up front, and it was going to be random. There you weren't break down all the film you want. It's not going to help you, and we were pretty successful with that. That was a whole lot better for us than, lining up in something where we were relying on the football instincts and the football techniques and so forth for our players. That's not who we had. We had guys that were just athletes and ran around and were physical. That's who played on our defense. I'm not saying we were the greatest football playing team out there, but we didn't have to be if we structured what we did around what our players were good at. So in the end, I think you have to be a good enough strategist to play the best way with what you have. So that's all sounds good. And then we'll coach, like a kid comes and plays for us, and we're changing schemes all the time. And you know, there's no continuity in our program. Well, your continuity has got to come from your fundamentals. Your consistency and continuity in your program comes from fundamentals. And you can line up in a 3-4 or a 4-3, and a lot of the fundamentals of the game don't change. There might be a couple techniques that are different, but a lot of it won't change, and that's what you've got to be able to teach. And even if you make some changes in your scheme from year to year, to me, what builds your program is how you approach the fundamentals of the game, and that'll never change. So, I was a strength coach for 20 of the 30 years, that I've been coaching. I was a strength coach in a number of places, including here at Grand Valley at my last stop. And if you compare what we're talking about to the weight room, it makes perfect sense. We may be lifting 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 6 days a week, whatever. But a good squat technique is a good squat technique. A kid that can rack the bar well racks the bar well, no matter what lift he's doing. You can change some things in your weight room, and that kind of industry is very fluid. There are always new things coming down the pipe about, what people are doing in strength and conditioning, and yet there are fundamentals and techniques that are consistent and have continuity in the weight room, and we don't question that at all. Okay, we're going, we were a 5 sets of 5 program last year, and now we're going to a HIT method, high intensity method, and or whatever. And but kids that are good lifters are still good lifters. And I think that you could change some of your strategies around the strength of your players in football, and good football players are still going to be good football players. So that's my strategy and schemes, and whatever strategy and scheme you think best fits your players, and about, that's what you ought to be doing. And then how you teach people to play the game, which I think is becoming less and less a part of what people do. Actually, teach people how to play football, and an individual player how to play football, not just some scheme. I think that's happening less and less. And if you can continue to do that and improve your acumen in doing that, that's a powerful thing. And if you want to test to that, just keep going lower. If you're a college coach, then go work with high school kids, which I've done the last 8 summers here. If you're a high school coach, go work with some middle school kids. If you're a middle school coach, go work with the 5th and 6th grade players. And when you go down in levels, it tests your ability to teach the game of football. Coaching people. Well, the first thing is, it's obvious, when your kid that you're coaching today is 25, nobody's going to care about, we ran the air raid. Like, well, who cares? And what you teach this kid about himself and about life is going to be important when he's 25, not, who's the field safety reading in quarters coverage. So I'm going to give you some, resources here that I use that I think are good and have been important to me as we go through here. So I'm kind of on a new strength and conditioning deal. I'm on some newer things, and I'm studying now. And so there's I would advise you to take a look at the website douglasheal.com, and he has a video. It's free video. Douglas Heel is a guy who's from South Africa. He's way ahead of the curve in a lot of things, or has been in the last 15 years or so. But he's got some stuff on his website, videos that you can watch that are free, about focus and intent that are pretty powerful. Uh, I'll give you a synopsis here. According to Douglas Hill, uh, you can change the vertical jump of an athlete by changing their focus or intent. In other words, um, he has people and he works with them, and he tries to find out what brings them stress and what inspires them. And if he gets them to focus on what brings them stress, they can't jump as high. And if he gets them focused on what inspires them, they jump higher. He also does a test where he has people hold their arms out to their side and try not to let him push them down. And I've actually done that uh, with some people, and it works. It's amazing, to be honest with you, that uh, if I figure out what inspires something that's inspiring to a person and something that brings them stress, we're unaware of how much our physiology is tied to our brain and our emotions and what our brain is focused on. So to me, okay, well, that's coaching. You're coaching a kid, you want to keep him, you want that kid to perform well, then you want to keep him away from what brings him stress. You want to keep his mind away from what brings him stress. And you want his mind to be focused as much as possible on things that are inspiring to him, because his physiology is going to be affected by that. Um, you want a guy that can a guy that runs 4.5 to run 4.5. I'm telling you, this plays into it. You want a kid that to play at his. We all say this, play to your maximum potential. Okay, well, you're not playing to your maximum potential unless your focus and intent is in the right direction. And that's according to Douglas Hill, that's a physiological fact. So I would, I would encourage you to check that out. And I will tell you that in my experience, while limited with this stuff, I am convinced that I'm not sure, just like I said earlier, I can't tell you what the offense or defense is going to look like until I know who the players are. I'm not sure how I'm going to coach Johnny until I know some things about Johnny. And some of that is, hey, Johnny, where does stress in your life come from? And Johnny, what inspires you? That's what I need to know if you want me to make Johnny the best player he can be. And so I would encourage you to check that out. There's a group called Forming Leaders, and they write the Habitudes series of books, and they were partners with us at Grand Valley. I think it's a great group. They have some great things about coaching people, and so your meetings. And I used to do this. Everybody hates meetings, but everybody loves movies. And what's the difference between a meeting and a movie? Well, here's popcorn, but we're not going to talk about that. So, meetings and meetings are sharing information, and so are movies. The difference is somewhat the media or the way it is presented and the plot. Okay, so with young people today, the more you can make your meetings like movies, the better success you're going to have with them. If you can, if you're technologically able to not do what I'm doing right now, which is throw a slide up and, talk about it. I didn't make this presentation for 16-year-olds, but the more you can take your information and find quick, eye-catching, interesting ways to share it that fit your player's culture, then the better off you're going to be. There's all kinds of examples of that, but I'll give you one. I happen to know a guy that's, I wouldn't say we're really friends, but we know each other fairly well. And he's been in the NFL and Division I and so forth as a coordinator. And but his terminology, a lot of his terminology, like his play names were after, cars, rappers, and I mean, just odd groups of names, especially for a guy his age. And he was like, "Well, this is what players know." Like, he's telling, he's asking me, is this guy an East Coast rapper or a West Coast rapper? Well, I got no idea, but his players know, and it makes perfect sense to them. And so being able to kind of meet people where they are and to try to make your meetings movies. The number one thing is the plot. That's what really sucks you into a movie, is the plot. And when you're sharing information, if you can find a way to give it a plot, you will have more attention out of your players. So you can make the exact same thing, speeches or stories. I'm a storyteller. That's kind of who I am. I tell a lot of stories. And so I, instead of giving a speech, tell a story, get the same information across. I think those things are great ways to try to improve yourself as a coach. And then the other thing that I see, I've yet to personally do this, but I think I keep thinking it's a great idea. I see it. I've substitute taught a little bit this past winter, and I saw teachers reviewing for tests with Kahoot, on the the game on the internet that you play. And what a great way to get your players to learn information and test what their knowledge of information that they are going to enjoy, and they're going to be, they're going to be connected with, is put that info on Kahoot. All right, my next thing is the players rarely exceed the coaches. I think every coach wants their players be 1/11th of the defense, be 1/11th of the offense, do your job, be accountable, be responsible, put the team first, serve the team. That's the term I use all the time, serve the team. And so I can tell you that, all those things are great things to try to push your players toward. But if you're a head coach or if you're a coordinator, the one thing I will guarantee you is this: players rarely exceed the coaches. So if your staff is if your staff is not serving each other, if your staff is, you got guys on your staff that want to be, they're not interested in just being 1/11th. Or they're not interested in just serving the team, then you got problems, because players rarely exceed the coaches. And I think that's the number one thing about putting a coaching staff together is, when you put your coaching staff together, you better be able to look around and say, okay, this is my team as the head coach. Because very rarely are you going to see players that are more committed to the right things to do than the coaches are. There's a book called, my favorite book of all time, Lead for God's Sake. It's a parable. I think it's an outstanding book. I've read it probably 4 or 5 times. I've done a book study on it. I've rewritten, if you have read the book, I've rewritten Joe the janitor. I basically made my own book of Joe, and it's outstanding. And it talks about uh, how, basically it talks about how to coach and how to lead people, and and the one of the basics of the book is you got to get it, you got to get you right, and then the people around you can get right. And I think you can expand that to say you got to get the coaches right, and then the players have a chance to get it right. And so that's my thought there. You know, I learned a long time ago. I don't know what happened to my book, but I used to have a book from back, it was copyrighted back in the '60s, written by Bear Bryant. My uncle gave it to me a long time ago. I have no idea where it is now. It's probably a shame. Um, Players succeed and coaches fail, and that's straight out of Bear Bryant. If you win a game, praise your players. If you lose a game, blame yourself as a coach. And I lived that for my time at North Carolina Wesleyan. Of you know if I didn't want to blame players. In college, you see it a lot of, well, our players just aren't good enough. Okay, well, there's recruiting that can help shape your roster. But usually when coaches are complaining about players, it's not time for recruiting. So you got the players you got, and your job is to make the most out of that, not complain about it. So I just believe that you're going to get a lot more out of people if you let them succeed. And if we fail, then hey, the coaches failed. I think you'll find that players will respond, not immediately, but over time, culturally, that people are going to respond in a positive way if they feel safe and they feel appreciated. And I think players succeed, coaches fail is a pretty good way to go about that. And the higher, your level of responsibility, the more you deal with the 80-20 rule, in my opinion, which is, usually on most teams, 80% of the kids are doing exactly what you want them to do. And, you probably got somewhere between 10 and 20% that are more challenging. And obviously, the 80-20 rule says that you're going to spend 80% of your time on those 20% of your players, and 20% of your time on the 80% of your players that are doing what you want them to do. That was a struggle for me when I was a head coach. It's been a struggle for me. I think it's always a struggle. But I think the way that I've learned to approach that worked the best for me was to always take the mindset of protect the players that are doing what you want them to do. Protect those players. Make decisions with those players in mind. What happens is you start making decisions because 80% of your time is on 20% of your players. You start making decisions based on 20% of your players, and you're penalizing the other 80% because your mind is constantly, your mind and your actions are built around the 20% of your players that maybe aren't doing what you want them to do. And that's a very easy cycle to fall into. And once you fall into it, it's pretty hard to get out of it. And you're going to build you're not going to build much. You're going to be constantly trying to sweep up the bottom of your roster from doing what you want them to do. You're going to be constantly trying to sweep up the bottom of your roster into the rest of your team. When really the people that are going to matter for you from a team standpoint are the ones doing what you want them to do. And you should be, if you can take the mindset of I'm going to protect those guys, then I think that's a pretty good way of going about it. Now, if my son is in that 20% that's not doing what you want to do, is that the best thing for my son? Well, it's got to be the best you can do within doing what's best for the team. And, I don't think just, well, you're not doing what we want you to do, so get rid of you. That's not the answer. But you don't want to become a coach who's constantly focused on the bottom 20% of the players from a, doing things the right way standpoint. It's not a very good way to run a program. It's not a very fun experience for anyone. And at some point when you get in that cycle, you probably start asking yourself, like, why are we doing this? And you're doing it, let's be honest, you're doing it for all of them. But it's really an enjoyable experience with those 80% of your guys that are doing it the right way, if you'll let yourself enjoy that. And you'll probably have more energy to devote to some of these kids that need more time if you're not focused on them all the time. So protecting the players that do what you want them to do, I think, is a great way to go about things. And so that's about, those are some things that, hey, 32 years, I think, to be exact, I've been doing this. Those are some things that I've learned that I would share, with other coaches, whether they're experienced or young or whatever. And so that's what I wanted to put together. I did not put a slide up of my contact information, but I still live in Allendale, Michigan. My Twitter is at Jack Ginn, JackGinn. Pretty fancy and original Twitter handle I got. And my email is ginnjack3@gmail.com. No periods in there. So if I can help you out in any way, if you want there's my contact info, and I'd be happy to do so. Thank you.